Okay, so let's go back to the question. Go back to the question of solitary confinement. So should we change solitary confinement? Should we limit its use? Should we abolish it? And does it have any potential value for the incarcerated, or did it ever? So understand, as I answer these questions that you're asking me, I'm answering them from the lens of my own experience and what I have seen from others and what I've learned, in my studies, and what I see in terms of family, community, and just life. All right, so my personal experience with solitary confinement, in my 25 years of incarceration, I did maybe 2 years, maybe 2.5 years in solitary. But understand that except for certain prison situations, solitary confinement is not solitary. Like, I was rarely in solitary confinement by myself. Solitary is usually two people, simply because of the overcrowded conditions of the prisons. And but even in that situation, what you're talking about is the solitary aspect of it is being locked in a small cell away from the general population and being in that cell 24 hours a day. And usually, like in the feds, we had showers inside of our cells, so we didn't even get out for showers, and, sometimes in solitary, you can get out like so. When you talk about solitary, you're talking about loss of movement, which, when you're already in a situation where you're inside a prison wall and you have limited movement, now you don't even have the movement, where you can go to the gym or go to the cafeteria or go to the yard, see the sun, see the sky. So it's extremely, it's extremely debilitating to the soul and spirit, to be limited to a very, very small area. So I don't see any value in solitary confinement. There are those who run prisons who say they use solitary for its punishment value, that people who are in that situation, we value the limited freedom that we have. So solitary as a punishment has value in controlling the population. Well, frankly, I think that's bullshit. Because when people are pushed with their back to the wall and they fight or they stab or they get in altercations, the punishment for the act is the last thing on their mind. They're dealing with the actual situation. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So in terms of the value of solitary for its deterrent value, it has very little value as a deterrent. Value. I think it should be totally changed. I think it should be very limited. The only value I can see in solitary is for persons who can't be in general population for various reasons, and maybe because they told on someone, or they or their life is in danger,
Sure.
and they need to be removed from the population for that. That's the only value I can see in solitary confinement, and even that should be limited. It's a much greater value to take that person out of that situation altogether and remove them to another prison or another situation where their life is no longer in danger. I don't see any value for the incarcerated in solitary confinement. I think it's barbaric. I think that it should never be used. On a personal level, I'm the kind of person who really endures whatever I'm forced to endure. And I tend to see any situation as a challenge. And when I was in solitary, I use it as a time to do self-reflection, to do more reading, do more thinking. And I refuse to let the cell and the environment close in on me. But it was arduous. I mean, it's very difficult to be in the same space for 24 hours a day and not move around. And when you do go outside, in the feds, it's like a huge, it's almost like an outdoor dog cage. You know, it's a fenced-in area, with a fence on top. You know, so it literally looks like gigantic dog cages, you know, lined up one next to another, but, you know, it's for men instead of for animals, you know, so it's really crazy. So, you know, in answer to that question, no, solitary confinement has no value for the incarcerated. Now, it has value for those who are doing the incarcerated. You know, solitary confinement is their main use of control in the prison situation, which is probably why it'll never be totally eradicated, because prison authorities see solitary confinement as a primary method of controlling people in prison. You know, unless you follow the rules, we'll box up all your possessions, take away your job, take away your freedom, and we'll stick you in a box 24 hours a day. That's a supreme method of control. So just for that reason, I don't think that outside activists will ever be able to control the use of solitary confinement on a full level inside of prisons. Your next question is, would you describe yourself as a prison abolitionist? If so, what led you to believe in abolition? Now, most people who know me and who know the work that I do think that I'm a prison abolitionist simply because of the work I'm involved in and the work that I do as an organization. And because of some of the organizations that I'm actually involved in. I belong to the Incarcerate PA. I belong to the Coalition Against Mass Incarceration, the Quaker Initiative in Mass Incarceration, and many other groups. But I'm not a prison abolitionist per se, because I've been in prison. And once you are in prison, you realize that there are some people for whom prison is their natural environment, and you see people when you're in prison whom you would never want to see on the street or in a community where your daughters or your granddaughters or your wives or your sons or family live, because they simply are not people who are fit for society. Now, that might sound like a harsh analysis, but I'm not a bleeding heart liberal, although I have many liberal views. But I have met people whom I would never want to walk down the street and bump into. By the same token, I've met some of the best people, some of the most intelligent, creative, dynamic people I've ever known in prison also. So it's like anything else in life. There's a place for prison in society simply because there are people whose moral code, their moral values are outside of the bounds of society. What do you do with a person who's a serial killer and they would, kidnap a teenager or, a young woman and over a period of time, rape, maim, and murder her and then bury her body, and they might do this for 15 to 20 years before they're caught? What do you do with a person whose sexual bent is rape and murder? So to say that you want to abolish prison is to say that there's no place for prison in our society. What I believe is that prison should be a holistic place, a place where persons who are at the state of mind where they want to transform themselves, where they want to change their lives and move forward into a different mode of living, should be able to receive the necessary help to accomplish that. I truly believe that. I believe that there are many people in prison who simply need the necessary time and environment and assistance to become the person whom they can be, whom they want to be, and whom they are not at this present time. But by the same token, when you talk about abolishing prison, you're talking from a utopian point of view, and I, for one, don't deal in utopia. I deal with the reality. It's like when I talk to Black Lives Matter people, and they talk about abolishing the police. So how does that work? When you have a situation where you have to dial 911, do I dial a Black Lives Matter activist? Do they come over and they make sure that me and my family are okay? Or do they, catch the person who just murdered my son or daughter? No. The same way you need the police, there's a place for prison in our society. But it's how we are policed. It's how prisons are maintained that is the reality of what we're dealing with. Sometimes we get caught up in the semantics of a philosophy or a liberal notion, and we're not really looking at, well, how does that work? So does that kind of speak to your question?
Sorry, just 1 second. I just want to make sure I typed that last thing.
So what I guess I'm saying is I'm not a prison abolitionist. I'm a prison reformist. I believe there's a place in society for prison for certain people. But I believe that the mass of people who are incarcerated should be assisted so that when they are released, they can be a viable part of society and never return to prison. And that's not how our system is structured. Our system is structured as pure punishment and not rehabilitation. And unless we're talking about really looking at making restorative justice a hallmark of our system, then we aren't really talking about the reality. We should be talking about how to make prison holistic, how to assist those who really want to be helped, and then how to contain those who are irredeemable. And that's something that folks don't really want to talk about. I'm a Rastafarian Quaker. And as a Rastafarian Quaker, I believe in two things. Universal truth and love. That's the Rastafarian aspect. And the Quaker aspect is that the light of God shines in everyone. Now that's a wonderful thought to have. But is it true? Does universal love and peace rule humankind? Well, I would posit, and in terms of the light of God shining in everyone, that's a principle, but it's not the reality. As I said, I've met some people whose souls are so dark that the light of God doesn't shine anywhere near them, and prison may be the best place for them. That's the reality. Now your next question is, are you good on your notes?
Yeah, I was just catching that last section. Also, I don't know. I just want to. I'm obviously gonna say it again at the end throughout, but thank you for talking with me, and especially I don't know. it's especially like generous of you to try to take the emotional time of like looking back and processing it with me and like, you know, maybe and answering me. So I appreciate it.
All right. So you have any further questions on the abolitionist part? You understand my point of view there?
I think I do. I think I think the questions that in my mind relate to it actually come up after the next couple. So I'll let you know if there's anything, you know, at the end or after those few that I think is missing.
All right. So your next question is, do you feel your work is faith-driven, and how important is being a Quaker to your motivation and your choices?
Yeah. I guess kind of relatedly would be like, I don't know. So it would just sort of, that you don't have to answer this specifically, but another way I think about this is like, would you be doing the same work if it weren't coming from a place of like religion or faith or?
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So what you're basically asking me is, you know, would I be running the Center for Returning Citizens if it wasn't faith-driven, and how important is being a Quaker to my motivation to my work? So let me say,
I guess so, yeah.
So let me say that I feel the work I'm doing is faith-driven. I view it as a ministry, as a life, as a vocation. I think that one of the ways that the Center for Returning Citizens is different from other organizations, and that is not to denigrate any other organization, because I feel like those who come to this work, you know, bring their skills and their talents and their beliefs to it. But I especially feel that those who come to this work with the experience of mass incarceration and with the experience of spending years and years incarcerated have to come to it from a spiritual faith aspect, because that's what carried us through. You know, people often ask me, well, how did you survive 25 years of incarceration? And it's not a simple question, you know, and it's often difficult for me to describe it in a manner that people understand, because you really have to live it. And those who understand it the best are those who did it. That's why I feel that folks in this field who have long periods of incarceration behind them and who've transformed themselves and who are now doing that work bring a power to it that can't be duplicated by other people, because we are the ones who spent the years apart from our family and watched our children grow up, and we taught them in 15-minute phone calls, and we parented them in daily visits, and we wrote countless letters and made cards and drawings and just poured our hearts out to them in an attempt to stay in their lives and to make them know how much we loved them and cared for them and did all that we could from behind bars. We are the ones who kept each other sane in situations that would make you go insane. And we developed the strength and the motivation and the faith and the spirituality to overcome incarceration and to come out as human beings.